Welcome to the latest episode of our podcast series for financial advisors. Today's episode is Edward Jones to Independence. It's a $1.7 billion post-litigation comeback story. A conversation with Dylan Ripley and Todd Vincent, managing partners and financial planners at Cedarwood Financial Partners. I'm Mindy Diamond, and this is the Diamond Podcast for financial advisors. At Diamond Consultants, we help elite advisors identify the right environment for their businesses to thrive, whether that's at a wirehouse, boutique, or independent firm. With nearly 3 decades of experience, we've guided thousands of advisors and represented more than $250 billion in assets transitioned. And each year, 1 in 4 advisors managing $1 billion or more who change firms are our clients. Our process is education-driven and based on building relationships, starting as your strategic partner well before you're even thinking of a move. To schedule a confidential conversation, call us at 908-879-1002. Wondering why advisors change firms and where they're headed? Are transition deals going up or down? Those very questions and more inspired us to create our annual Advisor Transition Report. It's the award-winning, data-driven resource designed for advisors that connects the dots between the motivations around movement and the firm's appetite for top talent. Arm yourself with the knowledge you need to make smart decisions. Download your copy at diamond-consultants.com/transition report. For many advisors who are considering exploring their options, the concern about legal retribution from their firm often lingers in the background. But what if you make a move and that fear comes to fruition? What will it do to your business? And what if, instead of derailing you, it ultimately becomes a catalyst for growth? There is always some level of risk and uncertainty when making a transition, even when you dot every I and cross every T. And a non-protocol move introduces even an additional layer of complexity. Todd Vincent and Dylan Ripley learned all that firsthand. Todd spent nearly 30 years at Edward Jones, and Dylan built his career there over more than a decade, eventually partnering with Todd in a multi-office practice overseeing close to $1 billion in assets. Over time, they recognized they could do more for clients and grow their business faster if they stepped outside the traditional firm model. In exploration, they liked the idea of having a support partner rather than building their own RIA, and ultimately opted to join Commonwealth Financial Network to launch Cedarwood Financial Partners. The transition itself went smoothly. That is, until they found themselves navigating a lawsuit from Edward Jones that lasted nearly 2 years. In one of our most candid episodes yet, Todd and Dylan walk us through that experience, sharing what it was really like and how they work through it. They talk about staying focused on clients, supporting their team, and maintaining perspective during a period of uncertainty. And they talk about what their business life is like with the lawsuit behind them, explaining how, despite that headwind, Cedarwood nearly doubled its assets under management to $1.7 billion. This is a conversation about resilience and what comes next, about how advisors can steady themselves, rebuild momentum, and grow on the other side of a challenge. So let's get to it. Thank you both so much, Dylan and Todd, for joining me today. I'm really excited for this conversation.
We're excited to be here, Mindy. As I was telling pre-show, we're just eternally grateful for Diamond Consultants, and shout out Kathy Nichols for helping us on our journey. But more so the podcast here that you do, I feel like during my time of due diligence, I got a master's in Mindy Diamond podcast. I listened to every episode, and a large part of where we are today is because of your show.
Thank you for sharing that. And I promise our listeners I didn't pay him to say that.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mindy.
You're welcome. Thank you. All right, a lot to uncover. You've had a really interesting story, and I'm excited to share it with everyone. So let's start where we always start. Let's give everybody just a short snapshot sense of your background.
Dylan, I'll go first. So I've been in the business now 30 years, 27 of which were with Edward Jones. My career started when I was stationed at Fort Hood, Texas, and I started dating a girl whose father was an Edward Jones advisor. And he kept trying to recruit me to join Jones. I didn't have any sales experience. So I decided to leave the Army, try to get a job selling something. And at the end of the day, he's like, why don't you just be my BOA? Because then I can train you and we can knock some time off the clock till his daughter, my wife, we could get married. So I started at his BOA, moved to Pennsylvania after she graduated to start an office. That was back in the days when Edward Jones really didn't allow a lot of advisors in one city. So we started a scratch office up there, had that for several years when he decided he needed help back in Temple, Texas. So he invited me back and we then built a career together here until Dylan and I decided to start Cedarwood about 3 years ago.
And thank you for sharing that, Dylan. Before you go, for those not familiar with the Ed Jones lingo, BOA, it stands for Branch Office Administrator. I just wanted to clarify that. Dylan, you're up.
Yeah, similar path. I was going down a different schooling, heading down the public administration route, and quickly realized I did not want to be a politician or a public admin figure. In my last semester of college, met with one of my dad's best friends. He was an advisor at Edward Jones for a while, and then he went independent during 2008. So we started talking about his role, what he did, how he did it, the impact he made. And I'm like, because that's what drives me is impact. And so I got to hear more about, it's not numbers, it's not sitting in front of a computer screen. It is more relationship building and helping people solve problems with an extremely emotional and challenging topic, which is money. So after that, I was full speed ahead, connected with Edward Jones and went through their FACD program and spent about 10 years there before we launched Cedarwood.
Did you guys come together at Ed Jones or through Ed Jones? Were you partners at Ed Jones, I guess is what I'm asking.
I was a regional leader at Edward Jones, and I was at a conference, and I met another regional leader from down near the Houston area, and he starts telling me, he's like, I have a young advisor who is going to just knock it out of the ballpark. He's from your area, and his mom's having some health issue. He'd really like to give back. Do you have any room in your location? And I'm like, well, I really don't, but I wouldn't mind maybe doing a good night plan, which is where you bring in a junior advisor to help share some assets. And he's like, well, you're going to want to meet this kid. So when we got back from St. Louis, we arranged Dylan and I to have breakfast together. And he shows up nice and early at a Mexican restaurant. And he and I hit it off right away. And I said, well, I'd like you to come up and join my office, but there's a couple things you need to do. Number one, that Camaro that's in the parking lot, you need to sell that. You need to get a different vehicle. And number two, you need a haircut.
Yeah.
And he did. That started our journey together.
I love it. So how long did you join together as partners or as co-workers before you left to launch Cedarwood? I just want to give our listeners some perspective.
8 years. We were in the same office due to the good night for about 2, and then got to be the good night ended. So you had to go your separate ways. And so we split up for a few years. We were up same region, all that good stuff. But it was probably 8 years of partnership and with Todd doing the asset sharing.
I want to come back to the notion of the good night plan, but also more importantly, which by the way, for those not familiar, the good night plan is any firm's retiring advisor program or retire in place program. But one of the things that's so indicative or so descriptive of Ed Jones is a whole lot of rules. For a long time, they didn't allow 2 producing advisors to be in the same office and all sorts of things. So I want to make sure that in your answers, we talk about that because I want to understand to what extent those rules might have driven you to look elsewhere. Were they a good thing? At what point were they not a good thing? But before we get to that, I'd love for you to give us some perspective about the business. So talk to us a little bit about asset size and employee size and the kind of clients that you service, both at Ed Jones and now fast forwarding 3 years.
Yeah. So today we sit around 0.7 billion in assets, and that number will actually go up. We conveniently yesterday brought on another advisor that we'll announce here shortly, but We were right around 1.7. And I think if we were to consider ourselves, we're now in the holistic planning business. We've just got the deeper bench of solutions and products that we can bring to bear with some really interesting technology. We just stood up and launched a partnership with wealth.com. So now we're getting into the estate side. And so those are big differences from where we were 3.5 years ago. And the way we charge, our fee structures and the value that we can provide is so much different than where it was because of the open architecture and our ability to really bring the best in class to bear and then market ourselves. I don't know if you've seen any of our marketing, but we're very genuine in that because this industry can be stuffy. We want to change that because it is a relationship business. So we want prospective clients and clients to know us much, much more than just how well we manage their money. Staff-wise, we've got about 26 staff members and 15 advisors now that help us service those clients. 11 branches across 4 different states. As of yesterday, we entered a new one. And so we're just extremely blessed and grateful. The growth has been tremendous, and it's just been well beyond what we even expected when we drew it up on a napkin.
Extraordinary. And having been privileged to have represented you in that transition from Jones to independent, I know how much you've grown in the last 3.5 years. Could you just talk to us about the numbers that Dylan just quoted and how they contrast to where you were when you left 3.5 years ago?
So about 3.5 years ago, when we were looking as a group that ended up coming over, everybody obviously had their choice to decide if they wanted to go independent or not. But we had several advisors that had like culture and like mindsets and wanted to grow and expand their products for their clients, which is exactly what independence gives you. We were probably just shy of 900 million. So we easily recouped that back and then grew through our own organic growth with clients. And that, I think, has really been a result of the product offering, of our marketing, of the relationships that we did at Edward Jones are the same relationships we do today. And people, I firmly believe, do relationships with the advisor. So with that regard, that's where we were when we left. And today, as Dylan just said, pushing 1.7 billion as far as assets under management, even in the midst of a non-protocol scenario, a TROs, a non-compete, we're thrilled at the results.
Okay, so extraordinary and so much to unpack. The 900 million to 1.7 billion in 3.5 years. And we're going to talk about the impact of the non-protocol transition because it wasn't all smooth sailing for you, which I think is going to be particularly interesting to our listeners. But how much of that was organic growth and how much of that was done by recruiting either other advisors from your world at Ed Jones or elsewhere?
Yeah, great question. We've added about 400 million through, I guess you can call it M&A, but we call it partnership because that's what they are to us. And then the rest of that has just been organic growth. And we were sitting a little bit less than 900 when we left. I think during that market cycle and the pull down, we were probably closer to like 850. And by the time the dust settled after year one, we were sitting somewhere in that Todd, 700 million range. And so, we actually took a peek under the hood of our organic growth numbers in there. So we got to try to bottle this up somehow and show it to the rest of the world. But yeah, it's been tremendous. And as Todd alluded to, it's just because of what we've been able to offer to our clients is well beyond what we even had in our wildest dreams on a whiteboard.
Okay, so amazing. And that's what I want to dig into that a lot. But let me just ask you a few questions just for clarity here. So number one, I alluded to the notion that Ed Jones is pretty strict, and that strictness is part of its allure. It's what keeps a lot of advisors at place. They like the strategy behind it, the culture behind it, the ethos of it. But when advisors like you leave, who have some sort of entrepreneurial fire in their belly that can't really be satisfied where they are, they almost always go independent. And they almost always say the same things you're saying in terms of feeling a sense of freedom or agency or control, whatever you want to call it, that they didn't have before. But talk to me a little bit about those rules. First of all, we have many Ed Jones listeners, but we have many non-Ed Jones listeners. So for the benefit of a non-Ed Jones listener, Todd, because you were there longer. Could you talk to us a little bit about like what were some of those rules? Like I know two producers in one office for a while. What were some of them? And then how did they help you? What made you stay through them for as long as you did? And then how did they begin to constrain you?
So some of the basic rules, which I understand they're trying to adjust, but the concept always was from the beginning. You had a solo advisor with a solo assistant, and you built a business. It's really not your business. It's always the clients are always Edward Jones, but that was the concept. It was very difficult. You knocked on doors, and the idea was to say, we're gonna see through attrition who really has what it takes to endure in this business. I described it as I would recruit and talk to people about Edward Jones is if you consider Edward Jones model back then, one person, one advisor, one assistant to maybe another wirehouse where you might have a floor in downtown Fort Worth that has 10 advisors. Well, there's probably 2 to 3 tigers and there's 6 that are okay. And then there's a couple that probably need to be fired. Well, if you do the one advisor model, the tiger shows up right away. Are they a tiger or not? And so it really was the quality people. And that's a good thing of Jones. And so, but as those tigers still want to grow, those tigers have visions. And the more the cage comes around them, they get a little frustrated. That's what I found for me. In 2002 is when I first began to say to my father-in-law, we should start our own, we should go independent. He didn't, he said, I don't have the energy. Before Jones, I've done a couple businesses. I'm comfortable. We can do a lot here. So I stayed because we're friends and partners. And that was rare because they allowed an exception for us to have a 2-person off. And then leading up to some of the reasons we left is over time, between 2 of us, we could not handle the amount of business we were doing. So we did a good night and then we did another. And in the end, I did 6 good nights. I gave away $120 million over this period of time to help to free up my ability. But all those advisors left my branch. And I think too, what would be the strength and the power if all those relationships felt unified in one spot? But that wasn't an option.
Left your branch and took your assets. And how did you get credit for them? How did that benefit you?
There was a formula that was used, but I can tell everybody, all the listeners, it is not what it is in the independent world where it's 1 to 2 to 3 times your business. No, it was basically a give. And that's one of the culture things that I think is good that we have here is be a giver. You're really trying to say, I'm going to help somebody else out, but I'm not really doing this for my own personal reward. And so if you did that for 27 years, and then you wanted to try to maybe do things a little differently, or if you leave, all of a sudden you're not a giver anymore. In fact, you're an enemy, and your relationships you had built with camaraderie with people for 20 plus years seem to be, cut.
I'm in this business 30 some odd years. I have never understood the rationale behind one advisor, one office. So I suppose that makes sense that the tiger emerges. I don't know if that always happens, but okay. But I think what that really good example lays bare is, and not it, look, what you're saying is that culturally it was a good thing for you. And I want to make the point that no one who stays with the firm 30 years or 8 years or whatever it is didn't benefit from being with that firm. Ed Jones served you well, gave you an amazing foundation. So what I'm about to say is not in any way an indictment of Ed Jones, but it is to say it's about outgrowing what worked for you at one point. And the notion that there's only one way to do things, I think, is a lot of the common refrain we hear from Ed Jones folks, that they drink the Kool-Aid for a while. There's one way to do things and it's their way. And then for whatever reason, either because they meet someone, they hear something, they see something, or they just themselves have that fire in their belly they can't contain, they begin to realize, boy, maybe there's more to this or another way to do things. So let me ask you both right now, I alluded to the fact that it wasn't all smooth sailing. 3.5 years out since you left Jones and formed Cedarwood Advisors as an independent RIA, non-protocol transition, and Ed Jones sued you. And that's the not smooth sailing. So I'm so grateful that you're willing to share with us about this because, one, we're an honest program here. So I'm not just about painting some rosy picture that every transition is smooth and easy and not without its trials and tribulations. So you're the perfect cautionary tale, but also the perfect success story, how it stunk for a while, but you really emerge better and stronger in the end. So what can you share with us about that lawsuit, how it felt, what happened, and how it impacted you?
Yeah, I mean, I won't sit here and tell you it felt good. There were sleepless nights, as you can imagine, and wondering, hey, did we do this right or wrong? But it's all so relative and it depends on who's looking at what. The reality is the group that founded Cedarwood had a lot of conviction and alignment in what they wanted in their next chapter. We were all intertwined together via friends or family. And so we decided, and we were well educated that, hey, this could end up in a courtroom. But we were so convicted and aligned in what we wanted to create and that where we were, we could do that, that it was worth all of that. And so we handled it really well. We had great counsel throughout that was very on top of the entire process, but it drug on a lot longer than we wanted. It ended up being about a 2-year battle. During that time, there was no adding advisors. There was no soliciting clients or things like that. But we still found a way, as the numbers show, to really grow this thing because, again, it goes back to the conviction. And I tell everybody, the one thing I'm most proud of over the last 3.5 years is how resilient our people have been in the face of all of that. And so I think that's what it took for us. And we are 100% a worst case scenario. Probably be another group that does what we did. And that's okay with us. We're at peace with how it is. And by the numbers, we're just in a much better spot today. And we jokingly say we wouldn't trade it because what it did during that 2 years, Mindy, is it just allowed us to deepen our partnership and the reason that we all aligned together. But then it also allowed us to be strategic in how we structured what are we going to go to market with? How do we build out the value? How do we use this 2 years of time that we originally thought, hey, we're going to be recruiting and bringing on advisors to? That's probably not the best case because there is some unknowns here, but let's use this time wisely and be strategic in it. So it all served its purpose. And now here we are a year after that. And it's just extremely fruitful. We brought on the 5 new partners, six, I guess, as of yesterday. And it's just been a huge blessing.
An amazing story. I think resilient is a really good word. Todd, so let me ask you, oh my God, you spent 30 years at a firm. You've both built an extraordinary business. You're talking about a culture of geniality, of camaraderie, of you're a giver and you're part of the whole, and we've got friends and comrades and colleagues. And now suddenly, as you said before, we're the enemy. So first of all, what did they sue you for? What, if anything, might you have done differently? Like, talk to us a little bit about that.
Well, I think what we need to remember is they're going to throw everything they can at you to slow down the potential of clients following the advisor. I mean, the truth is, and we all know this in the business, people mainly, they do business with the advisor. That's their local person. That's their face-to-face across the table. And for all those people who might even consider leaving, like, your clients, they love you, they respect you, they will find you, and they will follow you. And so back to your question, Mindy, it was on multiple fronts. One, it was our contract had 2 things, essentially. You're not supposed to solicit clients, and you're not supposed to solicit employees. And when you have a whole bunch of employees go to the same location at once, that would be a reason to try to sue. And number 2 would be, well, that's a lot of clients that are going to potentially leave. So let's try to put restraining orders in place and start with that. In the end, FINRA board found us guilty of violating our contract by having an agreement with Commonwealth that we signed while we were still at Jones. And I guess it was interpreted in such a way that you essentially you were working for two masters. So those other aspects were not part of our lawsuit.
So you poked the bear is essentially what it was, and they were looking to make an example of
We bear
you.
her. We bear her.
Right or wrong. Right. Okay. So I want to come back. We haven't mentioned that you are independent under the umbrella of Commonwealth, which was recently sold to LPL, but still independent. We'll come back to that in a moment. But let me ask you, Dylan, because you talked about it. So, oh my God. Number one, you're distracted by the anxiety of a lawsuit hanging over you for 2 years. Number two, you're constrained. You just said you can't solicit employees and you can't solicit clients. So how do you continue to do business, let alone grow? Like, talk to us about that, because that's really dispositive. To me, that's the theme of this.
We operate under a principle. So what happened? Now what can we do about it? And for us, the what can we do about it is just continue to do what we've always done well. And that's serve clients, serve people, serve our communities. And so we didn't stop any of that. We continued our community events. We continued our client events. I would tell you probably most of our clients don't even know that we went through that unless they asked, but because we never showed any of that. And it's just, again, going back to the resilience of our people and being proud of that. But it's finding ways, because we could still market, and now we had complete control over how we marketed and branded ourselves within our community. So we had to get really creative with that. So in year 2, we ended up partnering with a local marketing firm that has just revolutionized our business. And so we got a chance to put messages out there, get those in front of our former clients, which I think most of them actually came in year 1, if I'm being candid, 85%. So we got a chance to continue to get in front of them, and we still have some of them trickling in to this day. And so that's how, though. The how is this: we just chose, hey, this happened, but now what are we going to do about it?
So you were prohibited from soliciting your clients, but you're saying your clients found you anyway? I mean, that is the sort of way you deal with a non-protocol move. Is that what you're saying?
That's correct. Yeah, we could not call them after we made our FINRA introduction call. We could not call them back. So every interaction that we had after that phone call was initiated by them. And
Amazing.
yeah,
Amazing.
the local marketing and social media is a very good, very powerful thing nowadays. It's got its downsides, but I think for us, it had a lot of upside.
Yeah.
We just
Yeah.
left nobody's business and was able to tell our story without actually calling the clients and directly telling them our story.
Amazing. Absolutely extraordinary.
Mindy, I want to add one thing too. How do you grow a business over all these years? Like, you grow a business through personal relationships and referrals. In the minute that your clients found you, they're talking with their friends because they were typically your clients there. And so not only is that how they found us and came over, just word of mouth, that's also as they begin and felt our service and know that their product expansion, their costs went down. When they start seeing all these other things, I can speak for myself. My business started growing more again by more referrals, because the expansion of the services just led to new people. And so it's actually been the most wonderful thing in the end.
Yeah. So, I mean, as I'm sitting here, I'm thinking, oh my God, they did this they grew from 900 million, or you said almost 700 million, to $1.7 billion in 3.5 years, with a 2-year lawsuit really weighing you down. Just imagine what you're going to be able to do going forward. So, okay, now let's pivot. Thank you so much for sharing that with such transparency. I'm grateful for that. But let's pivot to the good stuff. Question 1, knowing what you know about that lawsuit, would you do it all over again?
I would, and I would have been sued 20 years earlier as opposed to 3 years ago.
Talk to me a little bit. You both alluded to it, but let's answer it specifically. So you spent a long time, both of you, in your own right, at Jones, believing that you had access to anything and everything you needed to do right by your clients. I'm presuming that's the case because you wouldn't have stayed if you didn't. And then seemingly one day you woke up and said, we need to do something else. Part of that drive was about realizing you felt constrained and wanted to be unconstrained. But what was the selfless part of it? Like, what were the drivers with respect to how you could serve clients better? And I'm not talking what you know in hindsight. I'm talking at the time when you woke up and said, aha, it's time to go.
Again, not to toot Mindy's horn here. She did not tell us to say that, but it was your podcast when you hopped on with Michael Kitsis. That's where I first was introduced to you. And you were going through what it means to be independent and what you can do. And that is really what kickstarted the conversation around maybe there is a better way. Because there was the death by a thousand cuts, as many people on here have said before. But there never was an actual look over the fence. And then once you actually start looking and you're like, oh, I can do that. That's actually not an industry rule. That's just a firm rule. Like all of these things start adding up and you're like, wow, there is a better way. And it is much, much better. And so it started then though, with doing due diligence without doing due diligence, I guess, is listening to that podcast, hearing some of the flavors. And it's like, okay, maybe this is something we should look into, because Todd and I had actually met for lunch. I think it was like a month before that, just talking about some of the frustrations, this was during COVID. So how the firm was handling the protocol. And we're here in Texas and a lot of our competitors are able to have people in the office. We're not. And I think all of those things just started to say, goodness, we're really at the mercy of the place that helped us get here. By all means, we're grateful for that. But at the same time, now has become the lid. So now independence was a way for us to take that lid off.
Love it. Todd, I have to ask you, so that is your answer, Dylan, is the typical answer of the next generation. The next generation, in a lot of cases, in multi-generational partnerships, almost always sees it first, whether it be because they see better technology or they feel the constraints more exquisitely. But for a senior advisor who's been around a long time, especially, a legacy advisor, a second generation advisor, your father-in-law to you, 30 years in the business, it's so much easier to just say, yeah, all that stuff is tough. Yeah, I'm frustrated by it. In a perfect world, it would be different, but it isn't worth the hassle. I just don't want to upset the apple cart. It's more than good enough. I live a nice life, yada, yada, yada. So how about you?
I would echo everything that Dylan said. There were times long ago when I would question, why can't I have this investment in this portfolio? I see another person's statement from another firm and I bring it in, and this T. Rowe Price growth fund, blue chip growth fund is awesome. I can't add to it. Like there were times when I would be frustrated to say, I know I could do more for these people and they have good investment. But I want to get specific with your question. I think there was an aspect that I started to see on the independent world that was coming to fruition when my father-in-law retired, and how he was allowed to dispose of his book, which I had relationships with probably 90% of these people. Even though he serviced them exclusively, I always had his back. They knew me. We were family. Well, his retirement wouldn't allow me to take over those people. Why not me and maybe a little bit more help? And then I had a medical crisis come up in my life. And it really dawned on me then that I don't own this business. And if I died, even at a young age, and my wife, who's her father and her husband, helped build a huge business in Temple, Texas, combined 70 plus years, and I die, what happens to the value? How does she get compensated for being a supporter of her dad and her husband and a stay-at-home mom and doing everything that I couldn't do? And that's when we start talking about enterprise value and what does it look like to be independent, and how do you control your book, and how do you have control over the next generation taking over your book? Or that's an asset. And I always tell people, it's kind of like if you spent all this time in your life building this awesome pizza joint in Temple, Texas, and then one day I die, my wife doesn't get the pizza joint anymore. She doesn't get the revenue from the pizza joint, it's just not right. And I cannot let that go.
Yeah, that's such a good analogy about the pizza joint. I think that's a sweet story And it's right. It's a really good analogy and a little mind-blowing, actually, like a little unevolved on Ed Jones' part, right? Because even big firms, if you were an employee of another firm, of a Morgan Stanley or a Merrill Lynch, well, yeah, it's written into their contracts too that the firm owns the clients and not you. They definitely have a way for senior advisors to monetize their life's work, not necessarily to the same degree they would if they were independent and owned the business, but a way to do it in a much more streamlined and fair way than it is at Jones. So thank you for sharing that. So now let's pivot to what you both alluded to, the benefit to clients. Talk to us. So again, we said you're associated under Commonwealth, an independent broker-dealer. So 2 questions here, and we'll start with you, Dylan. Why Commonwealth? Why independence? Why Commonwealth? And then the second question is, so what are the things you're able to do as an independent that for clients that you couldn't do while at Jones?
Why independence is a pretty easy one. It's because we wanted freedom and flexibility. Those are two of our core principles. And so that was the only way we were going to get that. Once we saw that you can have it, but still have a world-class support system, that's where Commonwealth comes in, because they are world-class. JD Power for over a decade in a row now tells that story. But we love the people. We loved what they stood for, what they were about, and we loved their commitment to service. I think that was the above all, like the relationships we built through the due diligence process and that we still continued building after. You can't put a dollar value on that. And so it was just extremely impactful for us to continue with them after we got a chance to meet their leaders. Todd and I will tell you, like when we went to the due diligence, Wayne Bloom was sitting in the office and pops up and said, "Hey, can I get you breakfast?" or anything. We have no idea who this man is. And he sits down after going around the table, and then he introduces himself. "Hey, I'm Wayne Bloom." And it's like,
And Wayne Bloom, let's tell our listeners, Wayne Bloom is the
CEO of Commonwealth.
exactly.
And that time we thought he was just somebody setting the room. Well, that's his presence. It's very relational. And so that's why Commonwealth was the heart of it, was their culture and their commitment to service. And then what we've been able to do since, as Todd alluded to earlier, control on pricing. We wanted to control that. We wanted to be able to charge consulting fees and different things where applicable, that we could still work with clients. Because in the past, couldn't even give advice on a 401k, which I think is incredibly behind the times. And so between that, now, as I just alluded to, we stood up a partnership with Wealth.com. So the technology we've been able to bring to bear and help predict and create better outcomes for clients, being able to be flexible and nimble around those things between investment offerings and technology is a major benefit to our clients because of the value we're able to bring.
What sort of feedback have you gotten from clients, either early on or in the 3.5 years since, about you being independent? Because here's the thing, even though Ed Jones began to constrain you and you began through due diligence to understand that there could be benefits to breaking away, your clients didn't have that information and that knowledge. So I imagine, I ask everybody this, they had to be worried about who the hell is Cedarwood and what does that mean? And you work for a firm name, good or bad, that Ed Jones is a familiar name. What are you doing?
Oh, good question. So I'm a big picture drawer. So what I'm going to share is how I explain it to clients and how to offset the bad words that were spoken about us in a fly-by-night company and who is Commonwealth, blah, blah, blah. And so I tell people, the clients, even today, I use this at every appointment for a new client. I say, if you picture a target in the center is a bullseye, and it says Todd Vincent, financial advisor, and I could name myself anything I wanted to, but that's where I sit. And somebody has to come around me, the next ring, to hold my license, to do statements, to monitor everything I do, compliance. And that person is Commonwealth. And so that's their job, to help support me. And then around them is another ring that somebody has to deal with the money. I have to execute trades. They have to be the custodian for an IRA, all these things. And so that's Fidelity. So I want you to know that around me is a 50-year-old company that just focuses on independent advisors. And then around them is one of the largest money managers in the world. And I said, when I worked at Jones, they did both rings. And at Jones, the money came from the outside, and the direction of the arrow went to me. I got paid finally at the end. It starts now at the inside with me, and I pay those other people to support me. That allows me to control the costs and to give you better service and at a cheaper cost if we can do it. And so that's the way I explain it. And I think it's probably going to come in handy as we talk about the LPL purchase of Commonwealth.
Well, that is my next question. But I know that the number one rule of marketing oneself or selling oneself is to explain what's in it for them. And so it sounds like to make a pitch to a client, essentially what you were saying is your money is still safe. Nothing changes. Just who is scaffolding me might be a little different. But what's in it for you is I'm going to be able to offer you the same great service, maybe even more, but at better pricing. It sounds like that was pretty compelling.
Yes.
Combined in the wrapper of Todd Vincent or Dylan Ripley is still my advisor. That doesn't change.
Correct.
So let's pivot now to what comes next for your business. And it sounds like in this phase of looking for unconstrained growth with the lawsuit in your rearview mirror, in reconciling whether you stay with LPL or go elsewhere, that you're looking to really grow not only organically, but inorganically and continuing to do M&A and recruit other advisors. So what does that look like? How do you go about doing that? And in your mind, what is the number one quality of a potential partner in helping you to get there?
That's a great question, Mindy, because one of the things that we talked about going forward as we talk to prospective partners, we really believe, as one of our core value states, that you're family. And more time spent, like me, my wife, visiting that prospective advisor and their wife. What is their family like? Who are they really as a person? We're making the assumption they're great producers. They do what's right for their clients, but who are they as people? So we try to dig in a little bit deeper than they're a spreadsheet to say, are you a good fit for us? Because if we really want everybody to be a partner and we really want everybody to have equal say, if we really want to gather together for economies of scale, know that we are better together than alone, how do we find those people? And so in the world, I view it as this: you have givers and takers. We want to find the givers, and we want to make sure that those are the type of people who believe in something bigger than themselves, love their family, love their community, love their clients. And it's actually, you can demonstrate it, you can see it, you can feel it with them. And that's where I think on our recruiting side, we're just going to dig a little deeper. We don't need to have every person that has a book of business of $1 million to be our partner. No, we want quality people.
Right. So Dylan, let me ask you, that's recruiting the partners, looking at advisors outside the firm to come join you. But how about as you assess whether you stay with LPL, whether you bring in an investor, whether you move to another broker dealer, whether you go full fee only RIA, what's the most important questions or things you'll ask in order to determine who the best partner will be to facilitate that growth?
Yeah, that's a great question, and one we've chewed on a lot because we've gone through the gamut of options here, from potential investors, acquirers, to continuing doing what we're doing, but maybe with a different brand behind us. And all of them, it comes back to, we want to maintain freedom and flexibility. And so freedom to continue doing business how we're doing it, right? So no constraints on fees and things like that, or product offerings. And then the flexibility to be ourselves, right? We do have a unique brand and a unique culture. And I think that's a buzzword in our industry, but for us, it's our competitive advantage because we're so intentional on it. And so we want to continue to have the flexibility to maintain that. And then, as Todd mentioned, like, we want to make sure advisors are a fit for us, but that we're also a fit for them, right? Because if you're not looking to be a part of something bigger than yourself and to actually grow, because that's what we're committed to doing, you can see it in the services and offerings we provide. Like, we're here to help you grow. So we don't want the advisor that says, hey, I want to join you guys, but I'm just going to keep my book where it is. And that, we want commitment to the growth side or commitment to say, okay, maybe I'm here, but help me bring in a G2 to keep this thing going. And because we're passionate about that.
Yeah. So it sounds like, I mean, a very exciting next chapter is ahead of you. You must be thrilled, but still a little bit of uncertainty, a little bit unwritten because you're just not really sure whether you're going to be status quo in terms, I mean, you're independent. Either way, you own your business, so it doesn't matter. What we're talking about is, will you take on an investor? Will you change broker-dealers, et cetera? And that's still TBD, it sounds like, correct?
It is, but what we're at peace with and what we're excited about as we've narrowed it down to these final couple of opportunities is that all of them are going to take Cedarwood to a new level, and we're confident in that. So
Can't lose.
that's what
Yeah.
fires us up.
Yeah, can't lose. Okay, a couple of philosophical questions. So, and I'm going to ask both of you this. It sounds like you rode through the lawsuit for 2 years, which is a long time to live through uncertainty with not only grace and class and dignity, but with resilience. But I imagine there had to be moments of doubt in there, not just during the lawsuit, but even just the day you leave Jones. So I'm going to ask each of you, what would you say was the single biggest moment of doubt you experienced in the last 3.5 years? Todd, we'll start with you.
Wow, that's a toughie. I think that I and I both, we're go-getters. We're going to continue to move forward. So I never doubted my capabilities and my willingness to serve and drive forward. But the day the doubt came as you're getting closer to the actual hearing, you're in the midst of the FINRA court. And if the potential existed that you were going to have to pay a significant fine, well, then I was doubting because I'm like, I could be taking a very large step back at my age. Would I fight to rebuild it? Absolutely, because I'm not a quitter. But I'm like, wow, if I didn't come, I wouldn't be in this position right now. So that was probably my day.
Yeah, well, I get that for sure because you and I are probably about the same age. So I get that. But would you have done it all over again? Like if you had a crystal ball 3.5 years ago and saw the lawsuit in your front mirror and knew that there was a possibility that the lawsuit wouldn't go your way, would you still have opted to lead Jones and do this?
My answer would have been yes, because my driving force for me ultimately was I have a family that I'm going to take care of, and I've built a business and clients are going to follow me. And whatever that business is going to have a value that can go on to my wife.
That's an amazing answer. I love it. Dylan, what about you?
We're built the same. That's why I've always looked up to Todd. He's a huge mentor to me, but same thing. We just always believe there's a way, but we'd be naive and lying to you if there wasn't any doubt as we're sitting in that courtroom. And my wife had came down with a sickness about 2 or 3 days before we left. And I was like, I really hope I don't. And so it was around Tuesday, Wednesday, I actually came down and sick. And so I'm sitting there in my bed because I wasn't able to be in the room with my partners watching this. And I don't know if it was a sickness or what was going, but it was just like, that was the moment for me. I was like, I was like, there's some clouds here. Because for the longest, I felt extremely confident that, hey, we did everything we're right and we're moving forward. But I don't know, it just crept in at that moment like, well, our fate is really in the hands of 3 people up there. And that's not a place you necessarily want to be because the ball's not in your hands.
And you were David and they were Goliath. So even if you had done everything right, you were the little guy and they were the big bad wolf. So, and I mean that as a euphemism, but I'm saying that's scary and with good reason for sure.
Yeah, everything else has been like we faced obviously the LPL Commonwealth stuff. We faced other challenges along the way, but we've always been able to control the ball and move it where it needs to go and keep going.
One final question for you both. What would you say to if you were sitting in front of, and you probably have the opportunity to do so often, but if you're sitting in front of someone who currently is an advisor with Ed Jones, who says, I'm starting to feel some of those constraints. I'm thinking about it. I watched what you did. What is it that I'm missing? Why did you do this? What am I misunderstanding about independence? What is it that you would tell me?
There's several things. One is I know all those Ed Jones advisors want to do what's best for their clients, and they truly don't know how broad the product line available is to, I mean, you're getting a set of tools. You have more than just a socket set and a crescent wrench and a hammer. You really can get fine-tuned here with products. Number two, I think you actually will feel more secure in your destiny. You don't have to pretend. You don't have to be somebody you're not and worry about losing your job, because that can happen at any time for lots of reasons. So there's a security to your destiny. Three, this is your life's work. It's worth more than you probably know. You're probably not aware. And you know what? I've really noticed independent advisors, they're really great people. They think like entrepreneurs. It's been fun to actually network with them. The strength of Edward Jones is that regional meeting. And you, in that region, I was a regional leader, and you have all those good relationships. And you're like, man, that's really going to stink. But because we can idea share and all those things. But all of a sudden, when you start to integrate with other advisors out there, you're like, wow, there are really good people in the world. They're really smart. They are teaching me things about my business that I didn't even think about. So there is so much more that you don't know what you don't know.
I love that answer. And I want to just respond to the last thing you said, because I think people worry independent and alone. But not only are other independent advisors smart and they have been business owners and you haven't, so they know things you don't even know you don't know, but there's a willingness to share, right? There's a synergy, and you may say, why? We're competitors. But I don't think they think of it that way. There's plenty to go around. You're in Texas and you're networking with a guy who's in Boston or in Cincinnati, Ohio, and they're very happy to share. There's plenty to go around. So I think that's a great answer. Dylan, what would you say?
Yeah, I would echo a lot of that, but I would also say if you're having any doubts at all, sit there with a blank sheet of paper and write down what my dream practice would look like this, fee schedule, technology, what are you missing? What are those gaps? And if you can't fill them at Edward Jones, you need to take a look over the fence. But I would also caution to say, don't take a look over the fence unless you're ready to make a move, because once you see what you see, you can't go
Can't
back.
unsee it.
Can't unsee that. Yeah, I know many people have said it on here. We didn't know that was real until we actually went through it. But yeah, it's like once you get jazzed up and you realize, you find maybe it's just one thing at first, and you're like, I can't live without that in my practice. My clients need that. You can't go back and unsee that. And a good mentor of ours said that when he left Edward Jones, he's like, I knew Edward Jones, the firm, exceptionally well. But what I found when I started doing due diligence and I left is I had no idea, a very small iota of what the industry was actually capable of and what could be done. But your guests have shared it many times. The industry is changing rapidly. This is a tremendous time where independents have more access and better tools, better access to products than a lot of these major wirehouses do. And that used to not be the case. And that was one of the reasons that inertia was so real. But that's completely flipped, in my opinion.
Guys, this has been an absolute delight for me, I have to tell you, and I think it will be for our listeners as well. There's so much baked into your story, but I think resilience is the theme, and it's obvious, it's on full display. I'm really grateful for how transparently and honestly you shared, even about some of the uncertainty and the question marks that exist for you right this minute. Clearly, you've done great things, and I'm interested to see what the next 5 years looks like. So thank you. And I have to thank you again, not only for being so gracious, but for allowing Diamond Consultants to represent you. It was an honor and a privilege.
Thank you.
And thanks for all you've done and what you continue to do for the industry, you and your firm.
As a financial advisor, you hold yourself to the highest standards of integrity, honesty, and credibility. You are successful because you take your professional responsibility seriously and are dedicated to your clients. But are you living your best business life? Are your goals aligned with your firm's, or could a better option exist? Should I Stay or Should I Go is a book written with you in mind. It's a self-guided journey that walks you through the key steps that we take with our advisor clients. This strategic thought process and roadmap to professional self-discovery is designed to help you ask the right questions and think critically and objectively, whether you're considering change or not. Learn how to get your copy at diamond-consultants.com/thebook.